Welcome to College Football Addiction. This is our nameless Week 1 preview show. I don't have a name just yet for it. If you have some ideas, hit the comments, let us know. But I want to do this weekly. And best laid plans of mice and men. I wanted to live stream this, but just wasn't able to today. So I had to record it. I will be hanging out with you guys in the comments when I can. But let's buckle up and let's get right into it. Appreciate BetUS for their support. This video is brought to you by them. I'd like to do these, I think, on Thursdays. If you guys want to join me, if you've liked our college football content, if you watch me on other channels, whatever, I'd like to do these previews of the big games every single week. I'd love for them to be interactive. I want you guys in here watching. I'm thinking like Thursday mornings at 9 a.m. would be perfect. I don't know how that works for y'all. I don't know exactly what your schedule looks like, but that's what I'd like to do. Fridays are tough because I'm traveling to games a lot, but Thursdays at 9, maybe Fridays at 9. I don't usually get on the road this early. Maybe we can make something work. So let's lock in and let's talk about some of these games. But again, hit the comments. Let me know if you got a better name than the nameless college football preview show, or if you have a better time suggestion, Thursday, Friday, 9 a.m., let's pick one of those. I appreciate you guys for tuning in. Let's get right after it. Just before we get into the previews, I do want to give a little bit of a thought or breakdown on that Colorado game from last night. Absolutely phenomenal. Colorado wins by 5 in a game that never really felt like they were going to lose. Maybe you're a little nervous early on that first drive that North Dakota State had, but even then they bowed up and got them. Colorado played good defense second half. If not for they went into the prevent late, but if not for a weird interception, I mean, Colorado probably wins by 17, and North Dakota State doesn't even really go and get that last touchdown. So I don't know. I think that Colorado, has a lot to fix. I think Travis Hunter could win the Heisman, even with like a 7-5, 6-6 record. He is that good, and he's going to be, they've got two guys that are going to be top 5 picks, in my opinion. Right? Got to stay healthy. Got to keep your head on, but. I think that you've got two guys that are just supremely talented. They got a lot of work to do defensively. I thought the offensive line looked better, but again, you're considering the opponent. What do they look like next week in Lincoln? That's going to be a big deal. Wide receiver, they got one of the best wide receiver rooms in the country, if not the best. Their 1 through 4 is ridiculous. Ohio State's is good. Texas is good, but that wide receiver room is absurd. And it might be the best in the country. And so I thought the running backs look good. Defensively, again, a lot to clean up, a lot to get better. North Dakota State plays very fundamentally. I think that it's, you've got 2 weeks to really figure stuff out, because I think against a true freshman in Dylan Raiola, like they'll have some success there. And then I think they'll be fine in their rivalry game. And that, I mean, it could go either. Both those games could go either way. But if you split them, you're not in terrible shape. What's tough is when you get to the Big 12, man, every game's winnable, every game's losable. And so that's, coin flip games. Most teams are going to go about 500. So if you go 3-0 to start, and then you go 500, there's 9 games. So if you go 5-4, well, that's 8 wins, right? There's no game on Colorado's schedule that I'd say is an absolute loss, but there's not many that I'd say are an absolute win. Maybe Cincinnati, maybe this, that, and the other. So Baylor, so there's some games they should win, but there's some games that might be closer to a loss. You think Kansas is going to be tough. You think Utah is going to be tough. So we'll see. Colorado, at the end of the day, you just got to go win, and they found a way to win. They probably won by a little more than the score showed. I know that people may disagree with that, may say like, they were so close to losing that, 4 yards from losing. I think they had the played well. Guy's going to catch it in the field of play. You let him catch it, you wrap him up and tackle him. So I'm not super worried about them. I think they can certainly make a bowl, but they got to fix some stuff for sure. And then the other big one, UNC, Minnesota last night. Just prayers up to Max Johnson. That's absolutely brutal. Brad's been on my other show, Double Fresno Slaw, Florida State guy who won a Super Bowl. Great guy, really, really good human being. Sucks for him and his family, and that sucks whenever it happens. Obviously, it happened to Jordan Travis late in the year last year, but it happens in game 1, man. On a Thursday night, you're just like, man, this is devastating. So brutal to see. UNC did a good job coming back and rallying and getting the win up there. They were a 2-point favorite. They won by 2. So that, Vegas wins again. So, I enjoyed Thursday night football. Not as much great stuff on tonight, but then Saturday at noon, we get started, and let's talk about those games. Clemson and UGA get us started. We're going to talk about every game that was on the thumbnail. Clemson, UGA, Penn State, West Virginia, UF, Miami, Notre Dame, Texas A&M, LSU, USC, Florida State, Boston College. We will typically talk about Florida State on here because I know a lot of you are Noles that are subscribed, but when they play a bigger game or play a Monday night game, we're certainly going to talk about that. Clemson, UGA gets us started. at 12 p.m. Let's go to my guy Brian on Clemson Football Live to talk about the Dogs and the Tigers. All right, one of the games of the week, noon on Saturday, especially if you live in God's time zone, Eastern time. We've got Clemson and Georgia. Brian from Clemson Football Live. Man, how you doing?
Man, I'm doing great. It's always good to be on here. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, we appreciate you for stopping by. We'll keep you for a few minutes, talk about this game, and then get you on your way. But, man, we're a day away here on Friday morning from the game, and we are super excited to see what this Clemson team looks like, what this Georgia team looks like, and really what the expectations will be going forward. It's you know, Dabo's joked about it in the press conferences. It feels like he's I don't know if, you know, if you get the vibe, but it feels like he's a little looser in press conferences right now, you know, making jokes about, you know, oh, we play an easy one in LSU next year and Georgia this year, you know. Yeah, we, you know, as a Florida State guy, we had LSU for years, and then, you know, Georgia Tech obviously didn't go super well, but you know, we're undefeated on U.S. soil, and then you know, Alabama the next 2 years, and so yeah, these tough ones to open are certainly nerve wracking. But man, what's the mindset right now playing, you know, the kings of the sport from the last 5 years?
Well, it's according to who you ask. If you're asking Sweeney, he's trying to keep everybody happy and level-headed and trying to make everyone believe that last year and the 2 years before that, you know, hey, this is just growing pains for us. We're actually getting better. We have better wide receivers coming in and so on. If you ask some of the good old boys who, I mean, they're still living in 2016, and they realize they don't realize that that's 8 years ago, and they think they just won a national championship. They're going to be kind of offended at what I say. But you know, if you're talking to me, the mindset going into this game is that our offense cannot resemble any resemblance of the past 3 years Clemson offense. It's just been absolutely anemic, no creativity, which leads to defensive coordinators going, hey, I can predict what they're about to do. So the mindset going into this game, it's actually quite different according to who you're talking to. If you're talking to me, I'm at this point with my team, who I love, been pulling for all my life, grew up in that area. I'm just to the point, prove it to me. Show me that you're actually a better offense. Show me that you're actually serious about winning ball games. Show me that Garrett Riley is actually calling the plays. Because at this point, Clemson's offense has been its Achilles heel for 3 straight years. The poor defense goes out there. They're fighting. They're doing what they can. Their coaching staff has developing them. They're scheming well. On the other side of the ball, other than hiring Matt Luke recently, and I know Garrett has 1 season under his belt, but who knows who was really calling the plays last year? That's still up for debate. Other than that, you might as well start the circus music. Dun, 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 when Clemson's offense runs out there, because it's been that bad. It's been that pedestrian.
Are you expecting? Are you hopeful? Are you just wait and see that you will see some improvement? Year 2 under Riley, Cade another year older. What? I'm almost hopeful for you that it'll get better. Maybe not in week 5 or whenever you come to Tallahassee, but in the other games, sure. Are you almost hopeful that it gets better, or do you think it'll improve somewhat?
You know, if you watch my show, and I know you check it out from time to time, I boldly say that hope is not a football strategy. And if we have fallen that far from the mountain that we are hoping that things will get better, that's really kind of a carbon test in itself. It tells you how far we've declined, especially on the offensive side of the ball. I mean, look, hiring Matt Luke, which I believe is arguably one of the best position coaches in all of college football, not just offensive line, position coaches. That was a big get for us. But the man is not going to turn water into wine in 9 months. He's going to have to retrain this offensive line that's been riddled with injury, questionable development. And pause there, TJ, for your audience. A lot of people's like, well, Clemson has to recruit better on the offensive line. They need to go get 4- and 5-star players. Well, you need to check into their players. You need to look into their history. They are 4- and 5-star players. In fact, one of our linemen, He was tied for the highest rated player we recruited in that incredible number 5 overall, according to 24/7 Sports recruiting class. Tristan Lee was tied with Barrett Carter. That class produced Will Shipley, Phil Maffa, Jeremiah Trotter Jr., Nate Wiggins. I could keep going on. So it's a development issue. We go on to the quarterback, Cade Klubnik, a guy who never lost in 6A Texas football. But right now, a lot of Clemson fans, a lot of people like to talk about, oh, he's a bust, he's overrated. Really? Right after DJ was a bust and overrated, and now the 4-star guy who's sitting behind Cade, they're questioning his development. When are we going to accept that this just may be, everybody sit down and buckle up for this one, coaching and development. So I think that you're going to have to give guys like Matt Luke time to retrain some of these guys. And who knows who's going to be calling offense for us. Dabo was never an X's and O's guy. In fact, he was a wide receiver coach when he was hired as interim and then eventually as head coach. So he's openly talked about how he's not an X's and O's guy, but it's interesting to know that he was helping call some plays supposedly last year. So right now I don't know what to think. I'm just in a state, TJ. Just show me. Show me that you're improved. Show me you're going to be creative. Show me that you're going to stretch the field. Show me you're not going to make this easy for Georgia's defensive team to just say, yeah, all we have to do is stack the box, take Maffa away, and they're done.
So the side of the ball that you do have a little more confidence in, I hope, is the defense side of the ball. A couple of years ago, held Georgia to 10 points. I don't know that they'll be that good this year. If you do, I think you win. Although did a couple of years ago and couldn't get it done. So, yeah, Georgia just is the team that seems to find a way every week. Defensively, Clemson, I mean, even last year, lost a game to Florida State, but really only gave up 17 points. Overtime doesn't count, and then, a fumble 6. And so, held a really good Florida State offense down. Defense wasn't necessarily their struggles last year. You do wonder a little bit about, well, if the defense just gets beat down because the offense can't do anything, then, yeah, I mean, the defense could end up giving up some points late. But I think the defense will give you a chance to stay in it as long as the offense can have some extended drives, even if they end in a field goal or two here or there. Just take the ball out of that Georgia offense's hands, because the longer they have it and the longer they can lean up against that Clemson front, which is very good, that's what I worry about the most. Is I think Clemson's defense will come to play. Can the offense be good enough to supplement how good you think Clemson's defense will be? But yeah, do you think this is more low scoring? Like, do you think Clemson's defense can keep Georgia down at least for part of the game until the offense can maybe get clicking?
It's really contingent on the offense. I'm going to give you an example. A couple of years back, we went up to Notre Dame, lost 35-14. It's one of the worst losses that we've had in quite a while, especially under the recent Dabo era. And if you're just driving by and looking at that score, you're like, man, their defense got roasted. No, it was the offense turning over the ball deep in their own territory. It was a blocked punt that was recovered for a touchdown. Most of the time, like you referenced just a second ago, most of the time, like in that Georgia game, 10-3, you hear 10-3, you held them to 10 points. Actually, Clemson's defense held them to 3 points.
Yeah, it was
DJ threw a pick 6. Yeah. So this has been the story for Clemson's offense for a while now. And so our defense, if you ever see them, I'm not saying they never mess up. They're human beings. Of course they do. But if you ever see us give up a lot of points, it's because our offense has put them at a handicap. And our defense, on the offensive side of the ball, I'll go back to the offensive side of the ball. I talked about our positional coaches, and I alluded to the question of development. I mean, when Dabo started at Clemson, he was taking guys that were 3 stars and making them into NFL draft talent. Now we're taking 4 stars and making them look like 3 and 2 stars on the offensive side of the ball, but on the defensive side of the ball, we're still producing first, second, and third round talent. How is it? It goes back to coaching. A lot of the coaches there on the defensive side of the ball are tenured. They have multiple stops, and even the ones like our defensive coordinator, who's never been a defensive coordinator before, this guy has been praised by some very, very brilliant minds in college football and the pros. Bruce Arians praised the guy as just brilliant. He got the keys from Venables. He hasn't wrecked the car. Everything's going well over there. It always goes back to the offense. So I'm hoping that the offense, even if they're slow, even if they having some difficulty here and there moving the ball. I'm just hoping they don't turn over the ball deep in their own territory and jogging that defense out there, because no matter how well they train, they're still humans. They will get tired, and that's where Georgia can exploit you.
Yeah, what's also tough for Clemson fans is I don't really know how now. If the wheels completely come off in this game and you lose by a ton, that'd be one thing. But I really don't know how much you can take away from how much the offense may or may not have improved. Now, if the offense comes out guns blazing, you're certainly going to say, well, it has improved. But it's going to be hard to know in this week one if they are still struggling or if they're just going up against the best team in the country, right?
Right.
And so that's tough too, right? Like you have to be somewhat measured before the fan base. Now, lose by several touchdowns, that's one thing, but before the fan base fires people again, or I guess he can't call in this year before Tyler calls back in. But it's going to be hard to measure that, in my opinion, because you are going up against Georgia. And so if this is if you score 17, well, most people don't score more than 17 against Georgia. I think that'll be tough for Clemson fans. So, expectations for the game, we'll ask you this and wrap up, but, do you have a score? Do you have a ballpark of where you think this lands? Can Clemson keep it competitive? What are you predicting on Saturday?
Well, I'm more of a guy who relies on history. And again, go back to my anchor statement here that you got to prove it to me. And as much as I hope there's going to be changes, as much as I would love to see Clemson win this ball game, and as much as I will gladly eat crow with a side of homemade honey mustard with this one, I'll believe it when I see it. And right now I have Georgia winning the game somewhere between 24-10, 30-10, somewhere in there. Now, if we see Clemson's offense move the ball, maybe take a little more time off the clock, we see no mistakes, maybe they have some problems getting the ball into the end zone, but they're playing a really close, aggressive game, as I said, consuming some time, we could see somewhere along the 17-13. Again, I'll gladly take, I said 17-13, a 17-13 Georgia win. I will gladly take Clemson winning this ball game. I'm just saying, for me, looking at everything that's happened over the past few years and knowing that though some coaches have been fired, their influence is still there. Yeah. It's going to be difficult to train some of these movements out of these guys. So I see Georgia right now winning 24-10, 30-10. And if Clemson turns the ball over in their own territory, they look anemic. There's no creativity on the offensive side of the ball, and we're offering more excuses than strategy. The excuse being, well, we don't have the personnel. Well, you did at TCU, so I don't know what that excuse is. If that excuse is going to hold water at Clemson. And then who knows who's calling the offensive play just transparently. It could get ugly. It could get ugly if Clemson does not have some creative moments on the offensive side of the ball. But 24-10, 30-10, somewhere in there, Georgia winning.
Yeah, I lean Georgia here, and I kind of like them with the points too, kind of like you. But hoping that we get a better game than that, and hoping for your sake and, the entire fan base's sake. I almost feel like the conference stuff has kind of brought us together too. Like, oh, well, these are our brothers in arms. It would look great if you guys kind of, saved our butts after what we did in week 0. So, Brian, where can folks find you? Where can they follow and see more of your show?
Yeah, you can find me on YouTube, Clemson Football Live. Drop me a line, say hello. And it's always good to just hear from people who saw me on other shows like this. So it's incredible. So, find me over there. I talk about Clemson football, but I do talk about other teams. Of course, had you on my show to talk about Florida State and your team going forward. So I look forward to seeing you over there.
Yeah, well, good luck this weekend. Have fun, and go find a way to get this win. So we'll talk to you soon, Brian. Thank you for hanging out, man.
Thanks for having me on.
Now, I appreciate Brian for being brutally honest. I know that a lot of the Clemson fans don't necessarily like him because he's not the most positive at all times, but I do think he considers himself a realist, and if he's being real, this is going to be a tough one for Clemson this weekend. Right now, a 2-touchdown dog over at BetUS. You can get that line right now. If you check the link in our bio, our description, you get a 125% deposit match up to $2K on your first 3 deposits. The next one, maybe if that game does turn into a laugher or gets a little bit out of hand, you can check out Penn State, West Virginia, a really, really fun one that I think is one of the most underrated games of the weekend. And you say, well, it's a top 10 team going into hostile territory. I don't think enough people are talking about this game. Penn State, West Virginia, going to be a classic. My guy Couz over at Couz's Corner is going to sit down and talk with us about it. In fact, let's go to Couz right now. Welcome back to College Football Addiction. I've got Couz from Couz's Corner on. We're going to talk about what I just told him before we got on here is maybe the most sneakily underrated game of week one. Penn State travels to West Virginia. Couz, how you doing, man?
Doing good, TJ. How about you, man?
I'm good. We got a little taste of college football last week. It wasn't necessarily a pleasurable taste for me.
Not for you.
But we did get a little bit last week. We're just days away from the start, the real start, the Labor Day weekend start of college football. Yeah, let's ignore what happened last week and just say this is the start.
Let's pretend it didn't happen, right?
Yeah. It's easier that way. It's a lot easier for you. So, man, a massive game this weekend for both these programs. Penn State, can you win the big one? You obviously can take care of the teams that you're supposed to beat, but can you win that big one that you need to win to kind of prove you're elite? They haven't been able to do that under James Franklin more often than not, and so they've always been kind of considered a tier below the big boys of Ohio State and Michigan, which most programs in the country are. I get that, and then West Virginia, right, trying to capitalize on an unexpectedly good year last year, where maybe they were a bit ahead of schedule and trying to take that to the next level, whether that's competing for the Big 12 or trying to find themselves in some playoff conversations late in the year. And so a really big one to get started. I love when teams play these big games. You think about Miami, Florida is a big one for other reasons, but Clemson, Georgia, a really big one, and Notre Dame, Texas A&M, a really big one. But I love when teams kind of put their money where their mouth is and play this early one before to start the game. Who is the game bigger for this weekend?
I think for me, that's an easy answer, and it's Penn State. I mean, West Virginia has not really anything to lose, in my opinion. It's a huge game, don't get me wrong, and Penn State is a team that West Virginia hasn't beaten in, gosh, I don't know. Well, I think it's 30 years, I think. But in all fairness, we haven't played them. But that being said, it's a huge, it's an old rival that Penn State has pretty much owned. And for that reason, I think they have the pressure on them. Plus, when you look at, Penn State is picked by almost everybody to make it to the college football playoff, right? Mm-hmm. If they lose this game, the road to the college football playoff gets that much harder, because then you have to beat, you may have to beat Ohio State. You may have to beat, Oregon, the other good Big Ten teams on your schedule. So the road gets harder for them. So anyway, that being said, I think it means a lot more to Penn State, because West Virginia it's not a Big 12 game for them. And West Virginia's best chance of getting in the playoff is to win the Big 12, and that would still be on the table even if they lose to Penn State.
So a little more pressure on Penn State in this game, and not only do you have more pressure, you're having to go on the road. And I can only imagine what Morgantown is going to be like before the game, during the game, and then maybe win or loss, but certainly after a win, I can only imagine what it would be like after the game. But having to go on the road and do this, game one, a lot of pressure, noon kick. Maybe the noon kick helps a little bit, not playing at night. But, man, I certainly think that ratchets the pressure up a little bit is playing this on the road.
Yeah, I would think so. And I know Penn State fans, I know they're not – look, they play in one of the biggest stadiums in America. Their stadium's loud. I get it. They say they're not scared to come into Morgantown. But I'm telling you, West Virginia's 60,000 fans can be as loud or louder than a lot of stadiums that have 100,000.
Yeah. When
everybody's juiced up, when everybody's, this excited over a game and this involved, it's going to be a tough place to play. I'm telling you, I think they might be underestimating Morgantown on a Saturday when it's full and when it's loud.
Yeah.
And West Virginia has revenge on their mind too, which is going to make it even harder.
Yeah. I remember, I remember some of those old. I mean, I say I'm dating myself, but still not that old. But I remember some of those old USF West Virginia games. Living here in Tampa, and we'd go up there, and Noel Devine and some of those guys, some of those greats on West Virginia, and man, they'd be calling timeouts like in the first quarter because they couldn't hear anything. Like it was insane. And USF used to play against everybody back then. Florida State, Miami, and so yeah, like West Virginia can certainly turn it up to a different level. Drew Aller, a lot of questions around him and what he's going to look like this year. I think there's a lot of quarterbacks in the country that are like very heavily debated, what they'll look like, what they won't. Well, DJU was one at Florida State. Shador Sanders is another one that I think is up there. But man, people got a lot of takes on Drew Aller, one way or the other of what he's going to look like. Drew Aller versus Garrett Green. Do you have a lean? And I don't. If you want to keep the blue and gold glasses on, I'm good with it. But do you have a lean on who will have a better game, or who you kind of expect to be a little bit better this weekend?
I'm going to have to lean Garrett Green here, only because he's at home. I think Drew Aller's a good quarterback, but Garrett's an energy guy. He feeds off of energy. He's obviously a great runner, so I think he's going to feed off of that and have a really good game. Not saying Drew Aller will have a bad game, but I think Garrett's going to have the edge there just because it's at home, and he'll have the energy of the home crowd behind him.
What do you think about your defense going up against him and that Penn State offense, who showed at times last year they could be great, but against really good defenses they struggled certainly. What are your thoughts on how the defense will match up against Aller and that offense?
Yeah, it's going to be a tough matchup, especially those two great running backs they have. But I'm confident this West Virginia defense is much improved from last year. I've done a lot of analysis of the roster this year compared to the roster last year. And West Virginia, most of the guys West Virginia lost off their team from a year ago, I feel like the guys they brought in from the portal are much, much, much better. So I really like the matchup, especially up front. I feel like if there's a weakness on Penn State's team, it's in two spots, wide receiver and potentially a couple spots on their offensive line. And I think West Virginia can exploit that. So I think West Virginia's defense is going to be much better than people think. But, man, it's still going to be a tough battle, especially those two great running backs they have.
So you mentioned the running backs, and maybe that leads really well into this. Is that the area, or is that the thing about Penn State that worries you the most in this matchup? And if it is, you kind of already explained that, so maybe give me a follow-up one. But if it's not, tell me what worries you the most about Penn State this weekend.
Offensively, for sure, that's what worries me, because I'm not sure you stop those guys. You might limit their yards, but they're going to get some big runs. There's just no way around it. You just got to try to limit those, right, and try to force Penn State to throw the ball more. But really what worries me is this Penn State defense. That Penn State defense, at least on paper, is one of the best defenses in America. I don't really know if there's a weakness. They're great at linebacker. They're great on the front. At least they should be. And they're great in the secondary. And they return a lot of talent from last year's team. They obviously are moving Abdul Carter from linebacker to DN, to take advantage of his pass rushing ability. So, it'll be interesting to see how he adjusts. But I expect him to come off the edge like a madman and be really tough matchup for that Mountaineer offensive line and running backs too, who are going to have to get involved in the running game probably, as far as or passing game rather, as blockers. But so that's what worries me really, is that Penn State defense.
What let's flip it then. What gives you the most confidence? Where do you think that West Virginia is going to try to exploit Penn State, try to take advantage of Penn State? What are maybe the best path to victory is, man, West Virginia was just elite at this one thing on Saturday?
It's obviously running the football. West Virginia has to run the football. They're going to have to use Garrett Green in the running game. Even, like I said, yes, the Penn State defense is great, but West Virginia, I think, can run the football against anybody. Now, the one question mark is, they lost Zach Frazier from a year ago, and he was a huge piece of that running game. When you have one of the best centers in America, it's a lot easier to run behind that guy. We have confidence that his replacement, Brandon Yates, is going to be okay there, but we don't expect him to be as good as Zach Frazier, because they don't make Zach Fraziers every day, right? So, but if West Virginia's running game can be as good as last year, we expect that Garrett has improved in the passing game. We expect the receivers to be better. So even if Penn State tries to make West Virginia one-dimensional, we think West Virginia will be able to complete some passes. But at the end of the day, West Virginia has got to be able to run the football, and I think Garrett Green is the X factor there, because it's really hard to stop a quarterback who can run the ball that well when, oh, by the way, you have two great running backs that you have to keep an eye on too. So to me, at the end of the day, it's West Virginia's running game, and can they run the football effectively?
Following up on that, how do you think you match up in the trenches, specifically your offensive line, their defensive line?
It's going to be a battle, man. I don't know about that one. I love our offensive line. I do, but man, that Penn State defense is just a different animal.
It's ferocious.
It's going to be. I don't even know if there's an argument they're probably the best defense West Virginia's going to play this year.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a battle. I expect this to be a low scoring game, to be honest with you, because I think I think, when you look at strength versus strength, it's probably West Virginia's O-line against their D-line. And who's going to give, right? So I don't know if I can give an edge to anybody on that one. I think it's going to be a very interesting battle. I would probably give a slight edge to Penn State, though, to be honest, and to try to take my biased glasses off, because I just think they're elite on defense, and there's no way around that. West Virginia's going to have to be creative in the play calling, creative schematically. They're going to have to make some big plays, and they're going to probably have to create some plays through turnovers and maybe even on special teams to win the game, in my opinion.
West Virginia currently, our friends over at BetUS tell us that West Virginia is an 8-point dog. So one score kind of. People don't really do 2-point conversions. So one score kind of, over under of 51.5. You can bet that at BetUS.com right now. You can use our link in the description to get a 125% deposit bonus on your first 3 deposits up to $2,000. Appreciate BetUS for their support, but do you have a prediction yet, Couz? Do you like you guys to cover? Do you guys? I mean, the money line's sitting there at 250 as well. What do you think ends up happening on Saturday?
I took West Virginia to cover when they were at 8.5. 8.5. I probably still would have taken them, but not quite confident enough to take West Virginia to win straight up. I do think it's going to be a tight game. I think it could be a 3-point game, potentially even within a touchdown, maybe. But at the end of the day, I just think you got to give the edge to Penn State, because I think on paper they're the more talented team, and I mean they've got NFL guys all throughout that roster, and it's just hard to go against that, man. But I did take West Virginia to cover, though. I do think they cover that 8 points, because the home crowd, they're going to be improved from a year ago, and they're going to be a lot of energy, but Jimmy's and Joe's at the end of the day is who wins games, and I think Penn State has the edge there slightly.
So we've already seen one pretty big upset this college football season. Maybe we'll see another. I did an SEC video where I picked every single SEC game of the year, every game that an SEC team was playing, not just the SEC on SEC teams. And I wrote one out for the Big Ten, and then I just been too busy with travel and everything else. But I never released this, but I'll go on record and say it now. Most of the Big Ten games are pretty easy to predict. It's, Oregon's going to win every game. Ohio State's going to win every game. Michigan's going to win, the games between those two are a little tougher. But all that said, I took West Virginia here. So I never put that out. I never recorded that video. But when I wrote it, I did pick West Virginia. Maybe that's just the Homer remembering Noel Devine, and Pat White back from when I was a kid, which I didn't like those guys back then, but
we'll take it. We'll take it.
Back, watching back some of those replays, I'm like, man, those guys are really good. Steve Slayton, and man, I hated those guys when I was.
Those were the good old days.
Yeah, but they, looking back, I'm like, man, I miss those guys. So yeah, so I'll pick you guys. I'll take you guys with the points and shoot, put a little sprinkle on that money line. So Pat Couz, I appreciate you a ton for jumping on and talking with us. Where can folks find you? Where can they see more of your work?
I'm over at Couz's Corner on YouTube. It's I cover West Virginia Mountaineer football. I cover the Big 12. I cover a lot on conference realignment over there. So come check it out. I would appreciate to have more of TJ's crowd over there. And also have a website, couzscorner.com, if you want to read up on stay up to date on Mountaineer sports. And it's also a way you can reach out to me through email and drop me a line there. It's couzscorner.com. Again, it's spelled COUZSCORNER.com.
Cool. I will link the YouTube. You guys can go follow over there. Again, Couz does a lot on conference realignment as well. I know you guys enjoy our conference realignment content, so go check him out. Again, appreciate BetUS for their support. Couz, I appreciate you, man. Good luck this weekend. Don't burn the city down if you guys win.
We'll do our best not to.
See you, buddy. I'll give you a pick for that game in just a little bit, but this is probably the game outside of my team that I'm most excited about seeing this weekend. And in fact, I might even be more excited about this game than I am for my game, because Florida State certainly just needs to take care of business on Monday night. But on Saturday at 3:30 in the Swamp, the toughest place to play in America this weekend, I'll say. I typically have them number 2 behind LSU, but I've got Florida and Miami, and I'm going. If you're going to be in the Swamp, hit me up. Let me know. Love to hang out. Love to see you. I'm wearing white. I got the memo to wear white. Florida fans will get that joke. Miami fans should get it too. So Florida and Miami, this is one of the more intriguing matchups of the weekend, and for different reasons. This is not intriguing in the same way that LSU USC is, or Notre Dame Texas A&M is. This is two programs that, man, have had a lot of frustration these last couple of years. And we've talked about this from every angle possible. We spoke with Manny Navarro of The Athletic. We've spoken with Coach Coop. I know you guys love Coach Coop. We spoke with Allie Peak of A Peek Inside Gators Football. And we've talked about this from every possible angle that we could. And I still don't know what's going to happen on Saturday. There's been a lot made about quarterbacks. There's been a lot made about the crowd. There's been a lot made about uniforms. There's been a lot made about the coaches and everything else. But there's one key to the game that people are talking about, but I don't think they're talking about enough. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. But Gators and Canes fans are absolutely frustrated and fed up with how the last couple of years have gone. And they understand rebuilds. They understand. But the expectation of those places is to win. They've won 8 combined national championships. They've won so many games. They're both, in my opinion, top 15 programs of all time. And the standard has not been met there the last few years. Florida firing Dan Mullen after a 6-7 season. Florida then having a 6-7 season and then a 5-7 season. Almost regression last year under Billy Napier. And then with Miami, you felt a little bit better about the direction that Miami was going in year 2 under Cristobal when they beat A&M and they were playing well. And then you have the kneel down that everyone talks about. And without that, they're probably an 8-4 team going into the bowl. And maybe that changes things and who plays and what bowl you get into. And maybe they even win a 9th game in that bowl. And so they're just one decision away from being better. But can they get over that hump? Can they really show that true progression from year to year? Now, they went from 5 wins to 7 wins, and so that is something, but it didn't feel like enough for Miami fans. And this is the prove it year for Mario Cristobal, and it gets started on Saturday at 3:30 in the Swamp. And I think a game that certainly means more to the Gators. I think it means a ton to Miami, and I know we clown Miami for being the offseason champions, and I know we clown Miami for celebrating in the offseason and then flopping in the regular season. But it just feels different this year. And I'm not a Miami fan by any means. I'm not a Florida fan by any means. And hopefully, as somebody who wishes both teams could lose, you can understand that I'm trying to be as objective as possible. And I think I am pretty objective on this one. And if you think my Florida State preview is going to be a little bit out in left field or a little bit biased, I'll buy that, right? I'm wearing a Florida State shirt right now. But I think I can be pretty unbiased when it comes to Florida and Miami. And I can tell you, I think this game means more for Billy Napier and more for the Gators. Miami will have their chances later to pick up a lot of wins this season. Even their tough game at home against Florida State doesn't look as daunting now. Maybe Georgia Tech looks slightly tougher, so you trade those two. But I think Miami season comes down to 4 games. Florida, Georgia Tech, Florida State, and Virginia Tech. Maybe you throw Louisville in there too. But I'm in wait-and-see mode on if they can have as good of a year as they did last year. Miami nearly beat them last season in 2023. I think that this game means a little bit more for Napier. It is really tough for me to see Florida making a bowl if they don't win this game. I'm not saying that's impossible. They could certainly beat UF. They could certainly, I expect them to beat Mississippi State. I expect them to beat Samford and UCF. I think this is the year that they end the Kentucky curse and they beat them. And then they could certainly upset a Tennessee or upset an LSU or beat a Florida State who didn't look great in week 0. So it's possible. But your path to that bowl gets much tougher if you can't beat Miami, who I think is a similar program to most of those other teams that we just mentioned: Kentucky, A&M, Florida State, LSU. Some of them have more talent, some less talent than Miami. But if you're not winning against Miami at home, are you convinced that you go beat Florida State in Doak? Are you convinced that you beat an LSU late in the year? Are you convinced that you can go to Knoxville and get a win, or that A&M comes to town and you beat them? Right? Certainly, Florida could win any of those games, but I think your confidence in them being certainties or more likely than not certainly diminishes. It's hard to imagine that if Florida loses to Miami that they would beat any of Tennessee, Georgia, Ole Miss, Texas. Well, there's 4 more losses immediately there. And so you're looking at a 5-loss season, and you pretty much have to be perfect outside of that. You can't stumble anywhere in your 50-50 games. And so it becomes tough. I think this game means a ton for both teams, though. When it comes to recruiting, when it comes to Billy Napier and Mario Cristobal selling their vision for what they think their program can be and will be, I think this game means a ton for both teams. There's been a lot made about quarterbacks, and I'll say it like this. And don't attack me if you're on either side, but when I look at the matchups in this game, I look at quarterback and I think about quarterback as really a push, right? I think Ward has a higher ceiling. Ward can go out and win you this game. Not saying you will, not saying you won't. But he could also go out and lose you the game. Nobody would be shocked if we get to the end of the stat line on Saturday night and we see that Ward had a couple of turnovers. Nobody would be shocked if we come out and we see that Ward threw for a lower completion percentage than Mertz did. I know people say Mertz throws the ball short, and I get that. I agree. Nobody's made more Graham Mertz jokes than I have over the last 16, 18 months. But I do think that Mertz's floor is higher than Ward's. Mertz likely won't lose Florida this game. He had 3 interceptions last year. 2 of those were tips off of another guy's hand. He may not be the most athletic. He may not be the guy that's going to go out and win one for the Gipper, but he certainly is a quarterback who you know what you're going to get. And I don't know that you know what you're going to get from Cam Ward. Not in week 1 anyway, not in the swamp. If this game was down in Miami or if this game was not in the swamp, then maybe I would give Ward the slight edge. I think I give Mertz the very slight edge in this game alone. I think Ward will have a better year. I think Ward will get drafted higher. I think he's got a much higher ceiling, and I think Cristobal at the end of the day will get more out of Ward than Napier gets out of Mertz this year. However, I think Napier is going to get a lot out of Mertz. Mertz proved a lot of people wrong last year, and this is year 2 in the system under Napier. I think Mertz is going to be really good. I think he could be a top 5 quarterback in the SEC. I think he might be close to that now. In this game, I give the slight edge at quarterback to Florida. It's very close. For the season, I'd give the edge to Miami, but in this game alone, I'll lean Mertz just a tad. Miami fans probably not going to like that. I'm trying to give you an unbiased take, though. Again, I wish you could both lose. I know that's not possible. Running back, I think Montrell Johnson's a great player. I do wonder if he's really 100% or not, how much he's going to be used, how much of a decoy he is, how much he can pivot and cut on that repaired ankle, repaired knee, meniscus. No structural damage, which is good, but how much he can move and cut on those that knee is important to me. I think Miami's got the edge here at running back. I think they're a little bit deeper. I think that Damian Martinez is really good. Even if you said that he and Montrell were a wash, I like Miami's running back room a little bit more. I like Trey Wilson a ton. I think at wide receiver, Florida has the best. This is maybe the best way I could put it to try and play a politician, right? Florida has the best wide receiver in the game with Trey Wilson. I think he's the best wide receiver in the state. I think they did a phenomenal job recruiting him and getting him in and now developing him. Billy Gonzalez has done great. But I think Miami has a better room, right? Is that fair? Florida with a better one player, Miami better room overall. I'd lean the Canes there. Offensive line, this is where maybe let's back up. Tight end, I'd give a slight edge to Miami here. This one's pretty razor thin too, so if you want to call it a push, that's fine, but I'd expect Arroyo to have a little bit better game than Hayden or anybody over there on UF's side. Arroyo needs to break out a little bit. We talked with Manny Navarro about that. Wide receiver, tight end, offensive line. I think this is the one that I'm pretty sure is Miami, right? Like, this is kind of like the running back situation where Florida's got some good pieces. I expect them to be better than last year, but I really like this offensive line for Miami, and I think this is what's kind of the difference is the trenches, right? Miami almost has SEC-level trenches, and Florida, I don't know if they do, even being in the SEC. Now, I think they're still really good. I think Florida's trenches are fine if they weren't in the SEC, but I don't know that they're good enough to compete with every other SEC team that's out there. I'd love to be proven wrong on that. I'd love to see this be more competitive, but I think that Miami's got the clear edge at offensive line. Napier's even referenced some of the questions that they've got on the right side. Obviously, every beat writer on Florida's side has talked about that and either upplayed that or downplayed that, whatever, but it's certainly a talking point, and so we'll see kind of how it shakes out on Saturday afternoon. Defensive line, again, edge probably going to Miami here. Now, I do think Florida's defensive line is going to be better, and I think they'll be improved. And I like Slackman a lot. I think it's big for Florida that they've got some guys returning, but they've also had some injuries there on the defensive line. That's a big issue. I think that's going to be trouble for them. And Miami's defensive line is really good. Now, I will say this one's not like a wide gap. I'd put Miami's ahead of Florida's. It's not a push by any means. I like Miami's a little bit better, but Florida's, I think, is going to surprise people. I think it also matters who they're going up against. Miami's defensive line gets to go up against what I think is a weaker offensive line for Florida, and Florida's defensive line has to go up against what I think is a tougher Miami offensive line. So who's going to be better on Saturday? Well, it's not just that Miami's defensive line is better, which I think it is. It's who they get to go up against, and I think Florida's defensive line has a much tougher battle ahead of them because of who they're going up against. So I'd give the edge here on defensive line to Miami. Linebackers closer. I like Florida's additions at linebacker. I like Pup Howard coming home. I like that they get Shamar James back, but I like, Miami's linebackers are really good. Malgo, I think they have one of the better linebacker corps in the ACC, in the country. I think that I'd give the slight edge here to Miami. That's not a runaway by any means. I think Florida's linebackers are very, very good. And then at defensive back, this is where I'd go Florida. And to me, this is the key. If Florida's defensive backs are better, Miami's are certainly a concern. They're starting some young guys. Will there be busts? Will there be kind of issues? This is where it all kind of comes down to. If Mertz has time, I think he'll pick them apart. I think Mertz will absolutely pick them apart. Florida will score 28 plus, and they'll have a great shot to win the game. That all comes down to what I think is the most important matchup of the game. I'll get to that in a minute. Do want to say special teams. Florida's been a disaster the last 2 years. They put an emphasis on it. Coaching. Miami's not been great, and neither has Florida. So I think that's something to watch out for. How does Florida special teams look? Do they get 11 guys on the field every play? That's not even a joke. I'm not trolling. That's something that they are focused on this year. Mario hired an end-of-game coordinator, right? Like literally a guy to tell them when to kneel down, take timeouts, run the hurry up, all those things. This game is important. These coaches understand their mistakes. You make all the jokes you want about them and how their performances have been, but they understand how big this is. They understand how big this year is for both of them, and they're doing everything they can to almost get out of their own ways, right? They've sometimes Mario and Napier, every Gator and Cane fan watching this, and if you're a fan of another team, I think you'd agree, that your coach has gotten in your way a couple of times over the last few years and done dumb things. And Mario's are maybe more glaring. Napier's probably had more of them, but still, they're doing everything they can in their power to adjust for that. And so I think special teams, Miami's probably got a slight edge. Coaching, I think I like Miami's defensive coordinator, probably the best out of the four coordinators. Mario, Napier, I don't know. There's a massive edge there on game day. Napier does a pretty good job offensive play calling, so maybe I'd lean him just a little bit. But I think coaching is pretty much a toss up. The biggest matchup of the game, what I don't think enough people are talking about, is Florida's offensive line and Miami's defensive line. That, to me, you can talk about the crowd, you can talk about Mertz, you can talk about Ward, you can talk about kneel down, you can talk about special teams, you can talk about Napier, Cristobal, whatever. None of that matters. It matters. So I'll back off that statement. But none of it matters as much as those two units. Can Florida's offensive line hold Miami's defensive line back? Because I think that Florida's biggest question mark is their offensive line, and one of Miami's biggest confidences is their defensive line. And so if Florida can give Mertz time, I think Florida has a great chance to win the game. That is Florida's path to victory, is for them to protect Graham Mertz and give him time. I don't think they're going to be able to run the ball super effectively. I do believe that Napier will try to be balanced, but I don't think they'll have a ton of success running the ball. I like that Miami front. I like their linebackers. I like their defensive coordinator. I think that they're going to shut down the run. And if they do, and Florida has to pass the ball, I don't think they pass the ball 35, 40 times or anything crazy like that. But if Florida has to pass the ball, do they give Graham Mertz enough time? And I lean towards thinking that Miami has the advantage in those two situations. I think Miami's receivers will do fine against Florida's DBs. I think Florida's receivers will do fine against Miami's DBs. I think that you're going to see a pretty even game. But where I think it becomes uneven is Florida's O-line and Miami's defensive line. Now, I could be wrong on this. And Florida's O-line may come out, and maybe Billy Napier has been smoke screening us and trying to get hype for this, that, and that. Who knows, right? I don't think that's the case. I think the biggest question marks are on Florida's offensive line. And so if I've got to pick this game, which I'll do here in a little bit, later toward the live stream, if I've got to pick this game, I think I'm leaning Miami because I think Miami wins that matchup. To me, the most important matchup of the weekend is Miami's defensive line, Florida's offensive line. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. If you're watching this, if you're whether live or on the clip later, I'd love to hear your thoughts. To me, the biggest matchup in the game is that the front four of Miami, the front five of Florida. Can Graham Mertz check them into the right protections? Can the running backs effectively chip? How's all of that going to work? Is Miami going to bring more into the box? Are they going to blitz? Does the blitz pick up? Is that effective? Can Mertz easily read his hot routes? Now, I will say this: Florida gets the ball out pretty quickly at times. If they're able to do that, it can sometimes mitigate that rush from Miami. But that's the biggest part of the game to me. There's been a lot made about the swamp too, and I want to talk about this, and then we'll move on from this game and talk about Notre Dame, Texas A&M. But I think the swamp is an important factor. It's not the deciding factor in this game, in my opinion. Now, it could be, right? We've seen games at the swamp that you didn't think that the Gators were going to win. They were an underdog, and the swamp came alive, and they ended up taking the game. You think about Tennessee last year. You think about Utah the year before. You think about Auburn back in 2019, I think it was. You think about Ole Miss back in 2015. These are games that Florida wasn't necessarily supposed to win, but they found a way. But it works the other way too. Florida State, when I was thinking about this game, came in 2015, and that's the largest crowd that has ever been recorded at the Swamp. And that was a 10-win Gator team coming into the game. And the crowd was crazy. I got there about midway through the first quarter, and the crowd was absolutely berserk. Where I parked 2 blocks from the stadium, it was almost hurting my ears walking up to the game, let alone when I got into the game in the lower bowl and watched the game. However, the team wasn't very good, and they could only muster 2 points in a blowout by the Seminoles, and that took the crowd out of it. And so here's how the crowd can make an impact. The crowd can make an impact if Florida comes out and goes and scores a touchdown to start the game, or gets a big stop to start the game, or Ward has a turnover to start the game. If any of that happens, the crowd will be fever pitch. It will be deafening. I think Florida's crowd is going to be the toughest crowd that any team has to play in this weekend. Obviously, LSU is playing a neutral site game out in Vegas. And so I'd have Death Valley ahead if USC was going there, but I think Florida's got the best crowd of anybody in the country this weekend. And when we ranked our toughest places to play on Double Fries No Slaw, I'm a Gator hater, but I deal in facts. I put the Swamp number 2 behind Tiger Stadium in Death Valley. And so I do think that Florida's got an advantage there. However, if Florida goes down 13-6, or they go down 17-3 or something like that, the crowd is going to be neutralized. It just is. I've seen it happen time and time again where that crowd gets taken out of the game. I think Arkansas went up 14-0 last year, and I know that was a noon kick. I know it was early. The crowd just wasn't the same in that game. That got lit late, but that's how Arkansas was able to manage and able to play, because they played with a lead for most of the day. If Miami plays with a lead and a couple score lead, I think that crowd gets neutralized. If I'm Florida, I don't know if I'm kicking off trying to say what if the defense can make it tough on Ward early, or if I just want that extra possession, if I want to get that ball at halftime. But man, if I'm Florida, I'm thinking about taking that ball first. Going and scoring and getting up. Napier's good on scripted plays. He is really good on scripted plays, and they put points on Georgia early. I'm taking the ball first if I'm Florida. I know they like to score on both sides of the half. I know they're not good in the middle 8, but I'm taking the ball first if I'm Florida. And I'm going down and scoring because they're good on scripted stuff. They're very good there. Napier's not a bad play caller as much as they want him to not be the OC. I'm taking the ball first. I'm going down and scoring, and I'm putting Cam Ward on the field with my team having a lead. That's what I'm doing if I'm Florida. Now, I don't get paid millions of dollars to make coaching decisions, but that's what I'm doing. And I think that could be effective. And that is, for as much as people have talked about the Swamp this week, that is how you use the Swamp to your advantage. I think Miami's going to be good on scripted stuff too. And I don't trust Florida's defense as much. I think they'll be improved. So that's why I'm not kicking the ball first. Now, you'd still be putting Ward up against it. You'd be putting Ward, in that crowd, in that environment for the first time in a tie game. But man, if they go score, you've neutralized that. I would go score. I'd make the crowd up 7-0. I'd make the crowd fever pitch the first time Ward touches the ball. I'm receiving the ball if I'm Florida this weekend. They're not good in the middle 8. I understand that. Maybe getting more possessions in the middle 8 helps them. But, man, you're going to have to get stops and scores no matter when they happen. I want the ball first. I want to go score. Napier's really good scripted. I think I'm taking the ball first if I'm Florida. I want to hear your thoughts on this game. I'm going to pick it here in just a few minutes, but I want to hear your thoughts on the Florida-Miami game. Hit the comments and let me know. All right, next up, Notre Dame, Texas A&M. I'm going to talk with my guy, Joe DeLeone from the Ruffino and Joe Show about this game, so stick around and enjoy that. He is one half of my favorite national show, Joe from the Ruffino and Joe Show. Maybe we'll get the other half on here in a little bit, but man, a big one down there in College Station. How you doing, bud?
Good. I'm a little nervous, and I'm not nervous because I don't think that Notre Dame can't win this game, but I'm just nervous because I know that Notre Dame, stepping into these types of matchups, they tend to not pan out the way that us Notre Dame fans would hope that they would. But other than that, I'm doing great. College football is back, and it's going to be a great weekend.
Yeah, ton of fun already underway, and we've got a lot of good matchups. And yeah, when you're a fan of a team that seems to schedule some of these bigger matchups to start, Florida State scheduled LSU. They've got Alabama and Georgia coming up. They had Ole Miss a few years ago. Notre Dame, a couple of years ago. It's nerve-wracking, but, man, when you can win that first one against a big team, there is truly nothing like it. All right, I got a bit of a hot take. I want you to rate it 1 to 10. I'll step on the live grenade here for the Aggies fans that are watching or listening, and then you can either jump on it with me or go the other way. But is Notre Dame being a little bit disrespected with this line continuing to move towards A&M? I know it's at Kyle Field. Mm-hmm. Game one of a new era. Notre Dame return. A&M just feels like such a big question mark to me. I expect them to be a dog when they go to Florida in a couple of weeks. Is it disrespectful to Notre Dame that they're not a huge dog, but that the line keeps towards A&M?
I think that they are. I absolutely do think that they are. You mentioned this is a very tough setting to play in, and I think that that's a really important context for previewing this matchup for Notre Dame, and it's probably why this line keeps moving. Just outsiders are looking at it as Notre Dame's playing an SEC team on the road in a tough situation for them. First game of the season. Can they handle this whole entire situation? They tend to start the season slow at times. Can they handle all this? But outside of that, if we pay attention to all the context, I think it is disrespect to look at a first-year head coach, first-year coordinator working with a new quarterback. Connor Weigman's been there, but has been streaky in terms of availability for his health. Hasn't played a ton of games. He's good enough to be a potential first-rounder, but he needs to actualize that on the field for an extended period of time. And then on top of this, they lost a lot of depth in the transfer portal. While their defensive line looks phenomenal, I don't know for certain what their linebacking core looks like. I don't know what their secondary looks like. It could be phenomenal. Mike Elko could have this team humming by the middle of this season, but we're talking about week one. Very rarely do first-time head coaches step into these situations without making mistakes. The example that I brought up to Blake, which he kind of hated me bringing it up, I thought of when
I know what you're going to say. I already know what you're going to say.
When Brian Kelly played,
his first game against FSU. Yeah.
There were a ton of mistakes in that game, and they almost pulled out that win, but there were still a ton of just dumb issues of coaching mistakes, just missed assignments, penalties. All of those things happen for a first game, for a first-time head coach, and most importantly, against a tough opponent. So Notre Dame's defense, I think, will travel. If their offense is a little slow to get going, I still have faith that they can pull out this game and they can cover, they can win. It's still going to be tight, but it feels really weird that we're just assuming that Texas A&M deserves to be the favorite in this game.
Yeah, if this was Elko's second year, and maybe A&M will light the world on fire in year one and just have one of those miraculous turnarounds, but that just doesn't usually happen. It usually takes a little time when you have so much turnover and you're a new coach. Now, could they come out and win this game? Absolutely. Could they win this game by 7? Sure. But the idea that it's just going to click, exactly what you just mentioned, with Brian Kelly going up against a Norvell in year 3 versus Brian Kelly in year 1. LSU had more talent on their roster in 2022. Yeah. When Florida State went into New Orleans and won that game thanks to the block at the end. But I don't know. And I don't know if people just – it doesn't feel like it's Vegas. It feels like people are betting on it, and that's why it continues to inch the other way. But, I don't know if it's just like that SEC logo that just means more, or and not to – maybe this is a good transition to this. Yeah. maybe it is Notre Dame in some of these big games, in some of these big moments. They've certainly, the past is not really a great indicator of like what this team is going to do, but it might be for the public. The public is the sheep or whatever, like go with the wind. But how does Notre Dame avoid that? How do they avoid falling into the same traps that they've fallen into when they have faced bigger matchups?
Yeah, this has been one of my bigger criticisms for Marcus Freeman. I think he's a great coach. I think he has so much potential as a head coach, and he's been a phenomenal recruiter. Hasn't deserved or gotten enough recognition for what he's done to build this roster up to this point and for how good this defense could be this year because of the collection of the group. But one of his biggest issues, it feels like at times when there's important games, they do tend to start flat. When they played Ohio State at home, they felt like they had a ton of energy. But then I look at games last year that come to mind immediately are Clemson. They came out flat. There were a ton of miscues, turnovers, just did not look like they were ready to get into a fight. Louisville is another example on the road in a tough-ish environment, but certainly not up to par to Clemson and Texas A&M, and they looked flat. It took them forever to get into the game, and in some of these instances have never really felt like they were really in there mentally. So I think this just kind of comes down to, for Marcus Freeman, is emphasizing and pushing his guys during practice effectively enough that they're focused and that they're ready to go. And I don't know what these practices are like. It's hard to get exposure and to be on the field for these practices. Even if you are a media member in the area in South Bend covering the team, you're not going to know for certain what those practices are going to be. But I just feel like whatever the approach has been for the first 2 years needs to change a little bit. And if they have a different attention to detail, a different focus, and Mike Denbrock is really being aggressive with how they're scheming things, I think that is the major emphasis for trying to win this football game against Mike Elko and Texas A&M.
Yeah, and you'd think year 3, coming off of a 10-win season, you've had maybe more time to prepare, right? Like this is a big opener, right? And you maybe don't always play this big of an opener SEC on the road. You'd think that maybe a little extra time to prepare, just the continuity in the program, which should help. Again, one thing that certainly helped FSU back in that LSU matchup was they had that week 0 game against Duquesne, and I don't know how much you can take away from that, but you do get some live reps hitting somebody else, and so not something necessarily Notre Dame has, but they do have the 2-year head start, and to me that should almost feel like enough to go in and do it. What is the area, the aspect of this game from a matchup standpoint? Not necessarily like, I'm a Notre Dame guy when we blow it too much in the big games, but like an actual matchup on the field that concerns you or that gives you the most pause in this game.
Yeah, it's all coming down to Notre Dame's very young offensive line going up against not only a talented defensive line, but what's going to be a very well-coached defensive line. We know that Mike Elko's impact that he's had with defensive linemen and the progression that he's had is when he was a defensive coordinator and when he was a head coach at Duke. It's very tangible. It's very noticeable. Right now, it sounds like Knapp is going to be starting at left tackle for them for the injured Charles Jagasaw, who is a true freshman. They're replacing Joe Alt. They're replacing Blake Fisher. It's not the type of a situation that you want to be coming into when you have to go up against Shmark Turner and Nick Scowerton, who could be a top 10 pick. Those guys are monsters. They're some of the best defensive linemen in the country. And if they're not quick to get the ball out, if they're not focused and have all their protections prepared pre-snap, and they are 100% paying attention to detail when it comes to all those things, they could regret it. They could lead to a big sack that leads to a turnover, whatever it might be. I'm typically optimistic in Notre Dame offensive linemen to have an impact early. I think it's something that's easy to point out that a lot of true freshmen for Notre Dame at offensive line tend to do really well in the past decades that we've seen. But this is a really hard matchup to step into if you're Knapp and if you're some of these other younger guys on the Notre Dame offensive line.
Notre Dame blocks well, they protect well this weekend, obviously makes their path a lot easier. To get to a win. If outside of that, if Notre Dame comes away with this big road win, they certainly set themselves up. The schedule sets up pretty favorably, even maybe the biggest game, and not to overreact too much to week 0, but even the biggest game that maybe looked like it was going to be tough on the schedule, maybe looks a little easier now in November when Florida State comes. Again, there's a lot of football to be played between now and then. Man, this feels like a game that you don't want to look so far ahead, but you almost start making plans for December if you can get this one checked off.
Well, more importantly, you need to win this damn game because if they lose it, they don't play anybody until they play Florida State. So there's this huge fat gap where everyone every week is going to be like, why is Notre Dame still ranked? They beat nobody. They beat Navy. They beat Army. Why are they still ranked? And everyone's just going to keep picking and picking and picking because their schedule is so light this year. And it doesn't help. I think Florida State's going to rebound once Alex Atkins is back and calling the plays. Maybe not fully to the point where they're the same team as last year, but to the point where they will be a competitive ranked matchup for when they come to South Bend. But because Florida State did lose, that matchup does lose a tiny bit of shine. So you need this game against Texas A&M. You need to win it. You can't go with any blemishes this year if they want to secure and have a guaranteed spot in the playoff. Otherwise, they're probably going to need a little help at the end of the year. If they are 11-1 and they drop this game and they're 10-2, they're definitely not getting in just because they don't have enough situations where they could have ranked matchups.
Yeah. And you're exactly right. Like if A&M ends up 6-6, 7-5, if Florida State, which I agree, I think they'll rebound. I think they'll be better. I don't, necessarily know that they're competing for it all this year, but they'll be better. But if they don't, they're 7-5, and then how does USC adjust to the Big Ten? I mean, you could play nobody with a pulse. Now, I don't think that happens. I think A&M's decent. I think that Florida State's going to be fine. I think USC will be fine against, the middling parts of the Big Ten. But yeah, I mean, it is very important, and the game feels like it means more. Year one, Elko can certainly sell a 3-point loss to a 10-win Notre Dame that's going to the playoff. It feels important, although Elko's schedule is markedly tough playing in the SEC. So do you have a lean? Do you have a score prediction? Yeah, over-unders, looking at like a 21-24 game, something like that. Like, do you think that's about right? Do you think it's more high scoring, lower? Where are you at on this one?
Yeah, I'm sticking low scoring. I feel 28-24 feels pretty good. I think it's going to be within that range, field goal, somewhere around there. Last I checked, I don't know if how the weather is going to end up changing, but it looked like it was going to be pretty rainy. So I would factor that in. I think both these teams are going to try and run the football. There could be some turnovers. There could be some fumbles, whatever it might be that happens to slow down the scoring and to slow down this game. But it does feel 28-24 feels pretty good to me in favor of Notre Dame.
Awesome. Joe, where can people follow you? Where can they find your work?
Yeah, you can catch me on Twitter at Joe DeLeone, and then go follow Ruffino and Joe Show on YouTube and anywhere you can catch your podcasts.
Awesome. I will link that in the description. I appreciate you a ton. I'm going to the swamp on Saturday, driving up, and then in stop and go traffic while I'm sitting, on my in my car. I'm planning on watching this game as I drive the rest of the way to Tallahassee. So good luck. We'll always enjoy you taking down the SEC and then being able to gloat a little bit on Ruffino and Joe on Sunday, Monday. So appreciate you, man, for joining us and hanging out a little bit.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
All right. Again, I'm not buttering him up. I love their national show. Go check out the Ruffino and Joe Show. It's such good stuff. And let's actually move right along and get the second part of that show, Blake Ruffino. Let's talk a little of that Sunday night game, LSU USC, and let's talk with Blake about it right now. All right, I've got the other half of I'm not buttering you up here, my favorite national show, the Ruffino and Joe Show.
Oh,
Blake Ruffino. Dude, I turn everybody on you guys' show. I love what you guys do. So
thanks, man. We appreciate all y'all are putting out, all the content y'all put out too, bro.
They'll do a great job. And you guys are like, I feel like I try to dabble in as much national stuff as I can. And man, you guys' insight is phenomenal. So if you're watching this, if at least, hopefully you like either Joe or Blake on this morning show.
Yeah, and that's a good thing about having co-hosts. If they hate me, they like Joe, and if they like Joe, they like me. So it's also it's so funny, man, because sometimes in the comments we have people like, "No, Blake was right. No, Joe was right." And I'm like, "Get him!" And then like I might start buttering some people up so they can come defend them. Virginia fans are pretty bad right now.
Yeah. Whereas my comments are just always like TJ's wrong. Like that doesn't matter. Like there's no nobody there to
at least like we can like debate about sports and like poke fun and have fun, whatever. But it's like when they take it personal, I'm like, okay. Like why are we taking ourselves so seriously? But look, man, I mean, it's been a already good. I mean, not for you as a Florida State fan, but just like if you don't have a dog in the fight of any team, It's been such good action through last weekend, yesterday. I mean, it's just been so good.
Yeah, I mean, even the Florida State, obviously you want the result to be different, but the game was phenomenal. Like the crowd was crazy into it.
Ireland looked awesome.
Yeah, like you want to win games, right? Like that's why you play,
Right.
but it's hard to complain about anything but the result. So, man, LSU playing another one on Sunday. The Sunday Boys, Louisiana Sunday University, I think is what they may rename it. Has anybody coined that yet? Am I the first?
Yeah, you might have been the first to coin that. Man, we've never played on Sundays outside these last 3 years. I think what happened, TJ, in that, ironically, was LSU signed a contract with ESPN for these away games and these like neutral site games, and then ESPN being greedy, they just like, well, we want more primetime games, so we're going to move you to primetime on Sunday. And I'm
Sundays too, yeah.
Okay. I mean, it's a standalone. I mean, look, man, the crazy thing about it is y'all saw this too. We saw it too on the LSU side. It's a big thing for recruiting, dude. Like it's a massive thing for recruiting. So I don't mind it. I get to watch all week one on Saturday and not be bothered, so then my team plays on Sunday. So it's going to be fun, man. I'm pretty nervous though.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Florida State on Monday. So I'm the same thing, right? Like you have 2 extra days to try and avenge that loss. You're like, man, just play already. Let's go. Man, it's hard to do this without bringing up how LSU has struggled, in opening games. And, outside of just breaking that curse or streak or whatever you call it, like, what do you think it is, man? Because it's spanned multiple coaches. It's not just Brian Kelly. It goes back. Like, what is it about that week one game? It's just bad luck. I mean, it could just be bad luck, at some point.
And I think all of them have a justifiable meaning. Like last year, Florida State was just better than LSU, right? Like, I mean, a borderline, what probably should have been playoff team. They would have been in there. I'm not trying to get in the argument with you, but you get what I mean. Like you lost to a team that was better than you. The year before, TJ, you got 40 dudes from the portal. You had a roster of 39 scholarship players, and then you're going up against, a Florida State team that had been a little bit more established. And then they beat you because you can't block on on an extra point, right? I mean, like that in and of itself. And Jaden landed a 99-yard drive. Then you had the Orgeron debacles when they go, and that was what it was. I guess COVID just being a big deal for them. I don't know. I mean, I think they're justifiable, but look, TJ, I've said it all off season. I'm not going to pull punches now. It's a must win. Yeah. I mean, not like for Brian Kelly, but like for a program, it's a must win because you can't go back on national television and primetime standalone and get beat. I mean, it just can't happen. And so I think, look, man, because if you win this one, you go 5-0, potentially going into Ole Miss at home at night, then no telling what happens. So little bit of justifying, but I mean, like, not really in some sense too. Like fans are really like getting anxious about winning week one.
Yeah, and it's just that it's all the hype, it's all the momentum, it's all the upbuild of the offseason to literally just get kicked in the nuts. Like Florida State, I mean, felt it this year, but the last couple of years you beat pretty good LSU teams. The year before that, they were a 17-point dog to Notre Dame, and they lost by 3 in overtime. And so, I know that we hate the moral victory thing, but that almost felt like a win. It was like, oh, well, we were supposed to get blown out, and we found a way to keep it close. And but to be in LSU shoes, it's time to get over the hump. And so,
no doubt.
USC, a team that underwhelmed last year. Man, they've got a lot of new pieces. And so it'll be interesting to see 2 new quarterbacks. And that quarterback battle and what a lot of times things come down to. And I know it's not the quarterbacks battling. It's, one quarterback against these DBs and one quarterback against the others. But who do you think has the edge at quarterback in this game?
I mean, I would say Miller Moss in this instance. I mean, Lincoln's still a really good play caller, right? You got same play caller that's still there. He's been in that system now going on his 3rd year. Nothing has changed. I think from just a system, TJ, it's got to be Miller Moss. However, if you want to flip it on its head and talk about experience, you got to give it to Garrett, mainly due to the fact, he did come in on the national champion in the second half, almost got down to 7, but he threw a pick. He threw for 300 yards and a half to on the national champion with a really good a top 3 defense. So I think both of them in their own way. But if I had to lean just like based off a scheme, it would be Moss. But if it's playing time, it's got to be Nussmeier.
Yeah. What about USC's defense has just been hot trash, but LSU's wasn't great either. I'll be a little nicer since you're coming from the LSU angle, but wasn't great either last year.
Call it what it is.
How much, I know you're out there. I know you see things. I know sometimes it's hard when it is, purple and gold against purple and gold, right? But what are your thoughts on LSU's defense this year and specifically in this game against a Lincoln Riley coached offense?
Yeah, just not being passive. Like last year, everybody came down on Perkins because of that game against y'all. And I'm like, look, man, you didn't put him in the right positions to make plays. He's made a lot of plays in fall camp that we have never seen, blitzing through the A-gap, tackling a ball carrier for a loss. I think those kinds of things, TJ, and just the overall pressure. Like LSU only sent 4 last year. Like last year against Florida State, 98% of all of their pass rush stuff only was with 4 down linemen. You cannot do that in this conference. You can't do that in just the style of play in the ACC and the SEC. You got to get after dudes. If Jordan Travis breaks contain and gets one on you, chalk it up, give it to him. So be it. But they're not going to really do that now. They're going to send a lot of heat, and that's what Blake Baker did last year at Missouri. TJ, they were number 10 in the country in sacks. They were top 10 in the country in rush defense last year was Missouri. And a lot of that had to be based off of just how much pressure they sent. A lot of people that are watching this watched Missouri last night as an example and saw it's the same type of schematical stuff that they're trying to do is basically what LSU is going to try to do to USC. So it's different with Lincoln, but if you're talking about a holistic season – than that. I do think they're going to get after Moss a little bit more. TJ, my God's honest thought about just the feel from LSU and Brian Kelly is that they just want to stop the run and they want to get after the passer. And they feel like if they can do that, you're going to give up yards to the air anyway, so might as well just try to stop 3 phases or 2 phases of their offense.
Yeah. Feels like Perkins, was kind of not feels like. Certainly
mismanaged.
Misused last year, but certainly still that X factor that could, you could look at the box score at the end of the game and be like, oh, wow, 2 sacks, 11 tackles, a pick 6, a forced fumble. And you're like, oh, well, there you go. That's right. Him.
We're still second in the SEC in tackles for loss, bro. Again, everybody's like, oh, you had a bad season. And when you look at the numbers, I'm like, From a slot safety? Yeah. I don't. TJ had 75 tackles, double-digit tackles for a loss, 5 sacks. And I'm like, bro, he played the nickel, right? That's where they pulled him at the rest of the season. So, but look, man, they got to get after it. They got to play keep away from them. I know the defense might be better and all that, but I'm not going in this game willing to risk any of that. You got to play keep away. Look, I think what's interesting, TJ, we talked about this after LSU Florida State last year. Braden Fisk and Lovett not being there, those guards did get better as the season went on. Obviously, we saw that when they played Bama, when they played Ole Miss, but they were really overmatched in that game. Look, you got 4 of your 5 offensive linemen returning with Caleb Jackson. You gotta run the football here. Yeah. And let Garrett get some, if they just want to go hurry up, keep the ball away from them. Let your defense rest. TJ, I did have somebody on staff tell me yesterday that the tablets on the sidelines they think is going to be a big deal for the defense, right? And I let's see how that progresses. I don't know if it will or won't, but that's how they feel. So I guess we'll see.
Yeah, the first half of that Colorado game last night, I think Colorado was down a field goal, but had 7 minutes of possession because they were just bombing it down. And North Dakota State seemed pretty pleased to just, all right, yeah, we'll take our time. We'll wear your defense out. And, I don't know that LSU's going to have 23 minutes of possession in the first half. But certainly if you can win that battle and then start to lean on those guys, because I do worry about USC's defense and the physicality. I mean, I worry about them all year and the physicality of the Big Ten and what the trenches look like there. But LSU's got those kind of trenches too, right? And I don't know that USC does. And that's where I think if LSU can be patient and everything's not going to be 90 yards in a cloud of dust on one play. You know, if LSU can be patient, I think they can wear USC down. Is kind of the outsider, like really no dog in the fight. That's the way I see it. Hey, you might go into the half down 7. You might, but I think over the course of a game, if you take care of the ball, you should come out the better team.
I don't mean this in a wrong way, but this was the comp that I gave LSU fans this week. You got to Georgia Tech it.
Right? Yeah, you do exactly what they did.
You do exactly what they did. And if you do that, look, it's going to be a complete difference because, look, Florida State wasn't trying to go, right? So that time of possession gets longer TJ, I think football is changing. I've talked about this ad nauseum sometimes. Look at the good programs and what they're doing, right? We just brought up Georgia Tech. I'm not saying they're a great program, but what was their style of play, right? You talked about the first half with NDSU and Colorado. What was their play? Yeah. What is Michigan's? What is Georgia's? What is Bama's in 2020? TJ, I think there's something to be said about the teams that we're seeing on the top getting back to that style of physicality. That's what I think LSU is going to try to accomplish. Can they do it? That's the ultimate. Can they do it? I think they can. Like I'm Thomas the Tank Engine, I think I can. But I don't know. I will say this about USC's defensive front 7, though, TJ. They might have not performed last year, and they didn't. Man, they got 5 top 100 recruits in there, too. Yeah. So I'm like, you know what, man? I get it. What does D'Anton Lynn come in and do? The Pac-12 Defensive Player of the Year is now there. You got both safeties from UCLA, who, by the way, TJ, were 1 and 2 in tackles for a loss in the secondary last year. So, again, we look at LSU like, hey, can their defense be better? And I look at USC as an example, and I'm like, all right now. I mean, because you got some – I'm telling you, TJ, they got some playmakers on defense. I wonder how much their scheme change helps them. And that's what really worries me more than anything is that, look, I know what Lincoln's going to do. The fear of the unknown with D'Anton Lynn and these guys fears me more than anything.
Yeah. In a best case scenario for LSU, certainly you'd hope that takes a little bit of time to get going and week 1
right
against a Brian Kelly offense like that you could be able to move and it, maybe that catches up by week 3 or 4 for USC, not week 1. So, all right, do you have a lean in this? Do you have you done a score prediction yet? Do you have a range or where you at?
I did it yesterday. 31-28. I picked LSU to win, but USC to cover.
Yeah.
I just can't get over, TJ, that the offensive line for LSU versus USC's defensive line. That's where I just can't wrap my mind around. And if USC bullies you, then you got more you're going to have some serious problems, man. Yeah. So that I go 31-28. And look, man, I think USC's a lot better than some people are giving them credit for. But by the way, one thing I would say. Special teams is a big deal in this one. USC was number 1 in the country in block punts. They were number 1 in the country in net punt return yards. They were number 1 in the country in net kickoff return yards. TJ, PFF had them the number 1 rated special teams unit in the country last year. Lincoln talked about that this week. He said, listen, I run special teams. And it just dawned on me, and I'm like, wait, we keep going after this dude for so many other things, but they were in number 1 in every other category. And I'm like, bro, you
better not let him get a DC.
Hey, my thing is, think about the game against FSU in 22. LSU fumbles and muffs 2 punts. Yeah. Special teams make a massive deal.
Yeah. Of course, they blocked 2 kicks.
Right.
The winner.
By the way, then the kid that blocked all the punts last year, the same kid's coming back. All 3 times that he blocks a punt, the very next play he went for a touchdown. That's how explosive USC can be if you're not paying attention. So Man, I'm as nervous as a kid that's sitting next to a hot girl in church. I mean, I'm just so nervous, dude.
That's a great one.
Oh man.
So but I do like that. I think that's Urban Meyer-esque, taking care of the special teams. I love that. Norvell in his opening press conference at FSU, and that's not necessarily what we're on. He mentioned offense, he mentioned defense, and then he talked for like 10 minutes about special teams. He's like, we never had a kick return in Memphis. We'd never done this. I told him we're going to take a kick back this year. He said we took 5 back. And so like, man, coaches that like really invest in special teams, that, it's like the forgotten part of, I mean, you look at what they're doing in Gainesville, right? With special teams. Like they don't even know what special teams is in some places. And you're like, man, this is a big part of the game.
Make sure you get your little thing on the sidelines where you can put numbers on them so people can count themselves.
Oh my gosh, bro. Yeah, make that orange and blue. Can we get that customized in orange and blue, please? But Urban used to say, I hear it from Allie all the time. Urban used to say, block a punt, win a game. So, yeah,
no doubt.
So, Blake, where can folks find you? Where can they find more of your LSU content and national content?
Yeah, Ruffino and Joe show. We're live Sunday, Monday, and Wednesdays at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. Just come to watch 2 Italians scream at one another on just a sport that they love, really. And then AYS Monday through Thursday, and then Saturdays on the post games. So AYS wherever you listen to podcasts.
Awesome. Appreciate you, buddy.
No problem. Thank you, man.
All right, before we go on, I appreciate Joe and Blake for their time and hanging out today. And I want to pick these two, but I'm going to talk about Florida State, Boston College before we do. Florida State, Boston College on Monday night. Will the Seminoles rebound? This is a big spot. I was on with Brian from Clemson Football Live earlier this week, and he asked me, what is the mood? What's the mindset going into this game? And what I told him was, man, it needs to be, I don't know what it is, but it needs to be desperation. It needs to be, we lose this game and our season is over, which is maybe how you should play every game in college football. Not so much with a 12-team playoff, but that's maybe how you should do anything in life is, if I don't get this done, it's going to cost, like, maybe that should always be our mindset. But all that aside, this game for Florida State, if they lose this game, now, of course, is there a way that they could get into the conference championship with 2 losses? They could turn the season around. Yes. You lose to BC. I don't see how you beat SMU. I don't see how you beat Clemson. I don't see how you beat Miami. I don't see how you beat Florida. I don't see how you beat Notre Dame. You're going to end up the season about 6-6 at best if you lose to BC. There's a lot better teams than BC on this schedule. And so it's got to be desperation. Florida State cannot afford to lose this game. The season will be over. And I don't think they're anywhere close to benching DJU, but you might as well just put in the young guys and get them ready for next year. And man, that is not going to be a good position for Florida State. They're doing all this to leave the conference and renovate the stadium and increase boosters and support NIL and all this stuff. Florida State's got to win this game. It's got to be desperation. And I'm painting that picture of, oh man, what if they lose? I don't think they necessarily do. I think there's a reason they're a 17-point favorite here. I know that Castellanos is a quarterback that a lot of people are concerned about, are worried about. He had a good game last year. He had 3 touchdowns, 2 in the air, 1 on the ground, had almost 300 all-purpose yards. He was really good. And Florida State's got to contain him. They've got to control him. They've got to spy him, I think. They just, Boston College watched that Georgia Tech game. They saw Haynes King going off around the edge, and don't think that they won't use who I think is a better athlete, maybe not a better quarterback, but don't think that they won't use Castellanos as a better athlete to go out and show Florida State what's up. I think that you absolutely should be concerned about Castellanos, but I do think that Florida State's now had 9 days to prep for him, and you played a quarterback that was similar to him in Georgia Tech, so it's not like you're unfamiliar, right? Neither one of these guys are a statue. This is just going to sit in the pocket. You somewhat know what's coming. You also played him last year. That helps a ton. You obviously have film on him. It's a new system for Boston College. And though Boston College has other weapons, I don't mean to minimize anybody else that's out there playing. It really, to me, comes down to stopping Castellanos. They've got a really good tackle. They've got some guys on the defense that I think are solid above average, but not a great defense. Now, I said that last week about Georgia Tech too, so maybe I should, be careful saying whose defense is good, whose isn't. But Florida State was able to move the ball some last week. They scored on 4 of their possessions. They got stopped on the other side of the 50 on a 4th down. So they were moving the ball, right? 5 of their 7 possessions, and a couple ended poorly for sure. But I expect the Noles to be able to move the ball here. I expect them to play better offensively. I think Mike Norvell will call the game a little less timid than he did last week. At the end of the day, you brought in DJU, and you may not be super, super confident in what his abilities are or what he can do. But, man, when Georgia Tech adjusted after that first drive and they were bringing 7, 8 guys down to the box, man, that's when you've got to start taking some shots. You can't get to where DJ's thrown 14 passes in the first half against Boston College and his air yards are negative. When you're running those swing passes, when you're doing the pop passes, when you're running a screen, those can be effective things. Don't get me wrong. When you're doing that, you're not forcing the other team to do anything but come downhill at 1,000,000 miles an hour and stop you short. Georgia Tech was very satisfied with Florida State just dumping the ball off, having a swing pass, screen here, because they were just bringing guys to the ball. And Florida State never adjusted, or they adjusted too late, and it cost them, right? They didn't make Georgia Tech ever get uncomfortable defensively outside of that first drive. Now, that last drive, Florida State drove the ball down, and DJ looked fairly good. He wasn't like a world beater or anything like that, but looked fairly good. Converted a 3rd and long, converted a couple of 4th and longs, and maybe got his mojo going a little bit. Maybe not only got his mojo going, but got where Norvell could trust him. They'll also be at home. They'll be in much more familiar territory. They'll have 50 to 55 to 60 plus thousand screaming fans supporting them, as opposed to, they had the majority in Dublin, but it was closer to maybe 25-ish, 30-ish. And so I think that'll help. I think that being home, being familiar, having that game already played, hey, already being able to say, here are our warts, here's what we need to fix. But the other side of that is Boston College saw your warts too. So I expect them to try and play as much like Georgia Tech as they can. Now, I don't think they have the athletes to be able to play like Georgia Tech did. I don't think they're as good as Georgia Tech. And that's no slight to Boston College, and I'm not trying to upset any Eagle fans that are watching. There's a path to Boston College winning this, but I think Boston College needs to play Georgia Tech's style of game and play it more effectively, because I don't necessarily know that you're going to attack Florida State's secondary. I think that is the part of the defense that I think is the strongest. But I think you need to play like Georgia Tech did and probably do it more effectively than Georgia Tech did. Castellanos was good in the game against the Noles last year, but I think he had 15 touchdowns and 14 interceptions last season. Certainly at times struggled to protect the ball. Odds would say that because he went 3-0 against you last year in touchdowns and interceptions, he might give you 1 or 2 this year. He threw over 1 a game, and again, he had a couple of games with 0, Florida State being one of them. And so he certainly is prone to the big mistake, and so we'll see if that can play a factor. Florida State got no turnovers last week against Georgia Tech. Can they get a couple against BC? That would help the score tremendously. That would help alleviate some pressure. Florida State needs to go out and get a lead and then get stops. They did that last week. They went out and got a lead, and they even kept that lead for a while, right? They got the lead. They were up by 1 after Georgia Tech answered, but then they got a stop. They got stopped. They went down and kicked the field goal. Like they kept the lead for a while. They just need to hold on to it and really be able to add to it more against a team that they're significantly better than. Again, first game for Boston College, second game for Florida State. That should benefit the Noles a ton, and I think they'll play overall better. But again, it needs to be desperation for the Noles. All right, let me give some bet US love, and then we'll pick some of these games. We'll talk a little bit of closing thoughts, and then we'll get out of here. But Bet US, the best place to bet this season. You can get a 125% deposit match up to $2,000 on your first 3 deposits. Not 1 deposit, not 2 deposits. You get 3 deposits to get up to that $2,000. I know a lot of people aren't throwing $2,000 in on day one. So if you want to throw a little bit here, a little bit there, and then get up to the $2,000, you get 125% on that full $2,000 up to $2,000. BetUS has some of the best lines in the game. You can go check them out right now. Great customer service. Really, really easy to use website. Really mobile friendly too if you're on your phone. Check out BetUS. Link is in my description. Go check it out after this show. All right, let's pick some of these games. Georgia against Clemson. Man, I have a tough time in this one, seeing Clemson being able to keep this thing super close, being able to win this game. But I don't even think they cover, man. I think Georgia wins this going away. I could see it being close at halftime. If you can find the spread at halftime, like under 10, I kind of like that. I like Clemson to keep it close in the first half. I just think eventually Clemson's defense wears out. I think the defense will be really strong and protect their side of the field and hold Georgia down some. But man, I don't have any confidence in that Clemson offense. I could see it being like 13-7 or so at half, 13-6. But I think eventually Georgia breaks through. Eventually the offense kind of lets Clemson down and the defense kind of just starts to buckle late. I'd love to be wrong there because I really do want this to be a fun, competitive, thrilling game as I am up in Gainesville pre-gaming for the Gator Canes game. But I think UGA wins this kind of going away. I think they're motivated. I think they feel like they got snubbed just like Florida State did last year. I think they were the best team in the country. And if you were going by best team, not to bring up that whole debate again, but if you were going by best team, you should have put Georgia in my opinion, if that's why you left Florida State out, because you didn't think they were good enough. So I think Georgia will take that personally. I think they're on the Revenge 2.0 tour here, and watch out for the Dogs this year. I think they cover against Clemson relatively easily. Would love to be wrong there just so we get a better game. Penn State, West Virginia, I already kind of alluded to it when Couz was on. I'm going to take West Virginia with the points, and I'll also take them outright. I think they win this game. I think going into Morgantown's going to be tough. I'm not sold on Drew Aller. He'll probably come out and throw for 400 yards because I've said that. But, yeah, give me West Virginia and the points and then a little sprinkle on the money line as well. Florida, Miami, man, I try to go through the breakdowns, try to go through the position groups. I could see a path to Florida winning. I could see a path to the Gators getting this done. But, again, the most important matchup to me is that offensive line for the Gators, that defensive line for Miami. I think defensive line for Miami wins that battle. And I think Miami wins. I think they cover in the Swamp. Now, if it gets to 3.5, I would take the Gators to cover. I think this is a field goal game either way. So I take the Gators plus 3.5. It's not at 3.5, though. It's still at 2.5 or 3. So I don't think it'll get up over that hook. If it does, go bet on the Gators. I like the Gators plus 3.5 if it gets to there. But I think Miami wins this. They could win it going away, but I think they win it close. So give me Miami. Give me the money line. I'll take Miami just to win this thing outright. I'll take UF with the points if it gets up over 3. Notre Dame, A&M, yeah, give me Notre Dame with the points for sure. I actually like them to win the game too, but give me Notre Dame with the points. I like them plus 3. If it gets to plus 3.5, I'll probably put even more on it, maybe a full another unit. But yeah, I like Notre Dame here against A&M. I think A&M's a little bit overhyped here. LSU USC. Yeah, I'm kind of with Blake on this one. I think USC probably covers. I'm not gonna bet LSU's money line or anything like that, but I think USC covers. So no money line pick. I mean, if you asked me, I'll say LSU wins with like a 1% confidence because I think this really could go either way. But man, getting 4.5 points, I'll take USC in this one. And then Florida State, Boston College, certainly like the Noles to win the game. I think Boston College could cover. I don't think they do. I think Florida State comes out kind of hair on fire, playing desperate, backs against the wall. They know their season's over if they don't do it. We'll find out a lot about Florida State this weekend. The only way the Noles don't cover, in my opinion, as a Florida State fan, I think I can say this. The only way the Noles don't cover is if they're just not a good team. Right? They're just a bad team, and they come out and maybe win by 3 or lose the game or whatever. Then they're just a bad team. I don't think they're just a bad team. I think they played poorly. I think they got surprised. I think they had an excellent game plan go up against them that worked to perfection, and then they still had a chance with 5 seconds left. So I think the Noles win. I think they cover. Give me Florida State minus 17 is where it is now. That could change, obviously, if it gets down to minus 16.5 again, which it got down to like minus 15.5 and has shot back up to minus 17 on BetUS. So if that is where it's at, then yeah, go with the Noles. I like them to cover. If it gets up over 17, maybe I like Boston College. Maybe 38-21 or something like that. Florida State, 38-17 is kind of where I could see it lying. So, hey, I appreciate BetUS a ton for supporting. Again, this video is brought to you by them. It'll be a live stream next week. Again, let me know in the comments, the Nameless College Football Preview Show. Again, I ain't got nothing better. If you got something better than that, hit me. Let's hear it. Let's go with it. I appreciate you guys for all the support, tuning in. Hopefully, I've been able to hang out with you guys in the comments some, but man, this is a ton of fun to get to talk college football with you guys all the time. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you're locked in. We appreciate you, and we'll talk to you soon. Enjoy week 1. Hit my comments and let me know what games you're excited for, what games you're watching, what your thoughts are on some of these games, and we will talk to you soon.